So, hello, my name is Joshua Knox. Everybody just calls me Knox. And we're here for infiltration and betrayal when trusted software turns rogue. Now, I normally take about 45 minutes to do this talk, and they gave me 25. So buckle up. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna fly through this thing. There I am. I'm still bald in that picture and in reality. I've been around. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I started my career as a high school teacher and transitioned over to tech. I've done federal contracting. I've done Kubernetes platform junk for the government. I worked for VMware and Tanzu and Carbon Black, and now I'm at Reversing Labs and just having a grand old time loving life. Reversing Labs, let me tell you a little bit about us real quick. So we have the largest scalable or searchable threat repository in the business. I'm going to keep walking back and forth across here. You're just going to have to get used to that nasty shadow. Over 40 billion samples. We're 8 times larger than our nearest competitor. The thing that is interesting about us is that over 60 companies use us under the hood. We're kind of like a best kept secret. Companies that you know, companies that are here and on the floor, are using us under the hood. Because think about it, okay? If you are some kind of big EDR, some kind of endpoint detection and response company, do you really have time to, with everything else you're doing, build out an entire malware detection system or a reverse file verdict system? Do you have that time? No, you don't. And so you outsource it to us because we're good at it. And there you see over there 20 million files we analyze every day from all of these different vendors that are using our APIs to get that file verdict and to be able to scan these files and check to see if they're good or bad. All right, we'll keep moving. So commercial software is a problem. When we think about being attacked when it comes to malware, the first thing we always think about is like email and phishing and getting that ugly PDF that somebody clicks on. But that's not always the case. If you look here, and I know it's kind of hard to see a little bit in this room, but if you look at some of these names up here, these are big companies who've been hit by software supply chain attacks. Kaseya, that was a couple years ago. They were hit with an attack. SolarWinds, MoveIt. We remember a lot of these. 3CX we're going to talk about here in a minute. All of these are companies that have had their supply chain attacked. Wow, I'm having like a vacuum attack in the room back there. That have been attacked by the bad guys. And I think the problem is that we just don't think about software supply chain attacks like we think about the everyday phishing attacks and other malware that come into our environment. So let's talk about some of these big attacks. Now, I know we're past Halloween a little bit. I gave this talk a couple weeks ago, I think it was the day before Halloween. And it was really fun because I told everybody, I hope this talk scares you just a little bit and that your eyes are opened to some of the dangers that are out there when it comes to these attacks. So let's talk about SolarWinds and 3CX real quick. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in depth later, but the headlines here for SolarWinds. They had the bad guys in their environment. To this day, nobody knows how long the bad guys were in their environment. I've looked. I've tried to search through blogs and all the official stuff. Nobody knows. So the bad guys were just chilling in their environment for who knows how long. And at a certain point, they figured out that they could swap bad code into the build process, and they waited until the Friday before Christmas break. And then they sprung the trap because they wanted everybody to go away and not notice, and it worked. It took a couple days for everybody to start realizing what had happened, and they started spreading their malware through SolarWinds distribution because there were updates in the software. Same thing with 3CX. In the case of 3CX, the bad guys got into the environment first. This is going to sound like a broken record. This is what happens. They get in your environment. And then once they get in your environment, they start looking around. And in this case, it was not in the build process. It was in the update process. So we'll hold on to that one for a minute. But what happened with that one was it got out, it started getting distributed, and it was the EDRs. It was the endpoint detection response companies, and I think it might have been CrowdStrike that had to call them up on the phone and say, hey guys, did you know you're shipping malware to like hundreds of thousands of people right now? You might want to check on that. So that's what we're talking about there. So let's back up and talk about software binaries for a second. When we think about software binaries, a lot of times we think of them as just one coherent thing like that, like a nice pretty block, right? But that's not what they are. They're actually a ton of little bytes and bits that the computer can read. And the best way I've come up to try to talk about that is think about like a text file. If you, as a human being, open a text file, you can read a text file just fine, can't you? And you can scroll through it, and there's different sections to it, and you can read all the data. Now, it's one text file, but when you open it, you can see all the different pieces of it. A binary is the same way to a machine. The computer opens the binary, and it can see all the little pieces in it. And there are several types of pieces in a binary. There's proprietary software, there's commercial software, there's open source dependencies, there may be artifacts, and when I say artifacts, I'm talking about data, different tables, different things that are in the binary that the program uses that are maybe constant. There's all kinds of things like that, metadata. Those things all come together, and those things form a binary. And so you have to be able to know what is in the binary before you actually use it. Now, lately, we like to use the term, or the illusion of talking about like food, for instance, right? You don't just pick up food off the ground and eat it. That's gross. I hope that gives you a gross reaction. Like, no, I would not pick up food off the ground or out of the trash can called the internet and just eat it, right? You have to know where your food came from. You have to trust it, and you probably want to know what's in it before you just put it in your body. So why do we just pick up software and shove it into the environment? Oh, look, here's a GitHub repository that has 75 stars. 75 people thought this repository was great. I guess I'll just download it and install it without giving it another thought. We do it all the time, and we don't think about what we're putting into our systems. So one of the big things, of course, in software supply chain security right now is the SBOM. And the SBOM is great. I want you to think about the SBOM like you would think about the nutritional facts on a bag of Cheetos, right? So you got a bag of Cheetos, and you look on the back, and it has nutritional information on the back, and it has a list of like, you know, how many calories are in it, how many carbs are in it, all the ingredients that are in it, and then you have to make a choice, right? What is your risk appetite for eating the Cheetos, right? You might think, oh, I do not want them. It has dye and too many calories, and I just don't want to eat that. Other people are like, it'll make me feel good. I'm going to eat this bag of Cheetos. And your risk appetite is fine with the bag of Cheetos. But notice the nutritional facts didn't do anything in and of themselves. They informed you, but you have to take action on it. And the problem is that with SBOM, I think there are a lot of security leaders that, bless their heart, they just don't quite understand. And they come to the IT people and they're like, hey, did you get an SBOM? And they're like, yeah, I got an SBOM. What do you want me to do with it? And they're like, good job. And they walk away. Because they've been told you need an SBOM. Okay. But just like the Cheetos, what are you going to do with it though? The SBOM requires you to have some kind of actionable thing that happens as a result of the information you gathered from the SBOM. So do you have filtering? Have you got a piece of software that parses the SBOM and then says, oh, these dependencies are bad, or we don't allow these in our environment? There has to be some secondary tool or something that helps. All right, I beat that one hard enough. Let's move on. So we need to be able to see more than what we usually think of in traditional AppSec. In traditional AppSec, normally we think about looking at the source code, and I told my marketing people this is a terrible icon. We're not talking about binary here, we're talking about source code. Source code and vulnerabilities. That's usually all we look at in AppSec. Does your source code look okay? Do you have common problems in it? Okay. Are there vulnerabilities in the dependencies that you've put in your software? Okay, we're done. We did AppSec. And that's absolutely not, that's pretty short-sighted, I guess is what I'm saying. There are other things you need to be thinking about. Maybe there's malware that has made its way in, like those other big cases we saw. Maybe there's tampering that has come in. And when I say tampering, I mean they've taken something that looks like it's good, that should be good, but the bad guys have tampered with it and turned it into something bad. Then there's secrets and IP. This is your development team shooting themselves in the foot and accidentally or lazily leaving some secrets or leaving something that you just don't want out there for the public in the binary. And it could be as simple as like debugging things. It could be some kind of key to a database. Who knows what it is that they've left in there. But you've got to be careful because people are scanning your code. If you put it out there, people are looking at it. Mitigations. Do you know the bad guys, when they do tamper with software supply chain, they add things into the code that will mitigate them being found? We'll talk about XZ here in a little bit, and XZ went to great lengths to do some mitigations. And then behavior. So this is one that I love because people just don't think about it, okay? I didn't download. I looked at the scan recently. There's a Microsoft, it's not you Microsoft, it's external. Some people have made a repo called Power Toys that allows them to do a lot of tweaks to Microsoft Windows, right? And I saw that one of our engineers had uploaded it into our system, and we scanned it and we started looking at it. It was clean, totally clean. There's no CVEs, everything's fine. But if you go under the behavior tab and you look at the behaviors that this program or this file can do, it can edit registry keys, it can add and delete files, it can kill processes. Now, I'm not here to say whether that's good or bad. All I'm saying is that as an organization, and an organization that's trying to decide whether something should exist in the environment or not, you have to make a decision. That's not malware. That's not anything that shows up on another scan, but are you going to allow that behavior in your environment, and are you going to accept that risk appetite for binaries that have the ability to do those things on your systems? And if you've never thought about that before, you've got to think about it, because that can really play into the decision of whether you're going to approve a piece of software or not. Now, I'll keep going. In the case of the Power Tools, the other thing you have to think about, that repo had, I think, 450 contributors. And you have to start wondering, how are they keeping track of all the people contributing to this? What if today it's fine, but what if someone slips in and contributes something bad, and I get the upgraded version that has malware in it, or someone's been able to do a supply chain attack? You've already given that binary so many permissions, and then if they were able to slip something into it and you don't notice, now you've got a rogue binary with a lot of permissions to your systems. All right, let's keep moving. So we're going to look at a couple classic cases here. First one is UA Parser. This is just a JavaScript library that was very popular a couple years ago. And what happened was the bad guys were able to get the credentials for the maintainer. This is a single maintainer repository. And they waited, like most of the bad guys do, and they wrote malware. And at the right moment, at a coordinated moment, they logged in, changed his password, updated the code, and pushed it to the NPM repositories. And I believe it took over a day for the maintainer to get control back of his repository. And in the meantime, every time anybody did an NPM update, if they were using this library, they got the malware version of it. And it is a widely used dependency. And in this case, one of the things I want to show is this was a switcheroo with the source code. So the bad guys were able to pop in, change the code, and push it out. 3CX. In this case, the bad guys, you notice we talked about this one already, the bad guys were in the 3CX environment. They were all the way down at the package point of the supply chain. And you know when you're on the Windows desktop and you have that little tray, I feel like it used to have it more on like Windows 10 and before, but like you'd have a little tray down there and you have auto updates for whatever thing, right? And a little box comes up and says, you've been protected by an auto update, and then it like goes away. Yeah, well, this wasn't protected with an auto update. They had people who had auto updates on started getting the malware. And I know we've been taught that you need to update immediately. But again, if you are in charge of 5,000 endpoints and the buck stops with you about pushing that out, You have to think about what you're going to do to check the software and vet it and make sure it's good before you hit that button to deploy it to 5,000 endpoints and infect your entire organization with something. SolarWinds. This one was crazy. They found a flaw in, this was a Windows build, so they were building it inside a Windows server, and the actual build command, binary, they figured out a way to exploit it, and right at the build process, they switched the code. So the code looks great. Everything looks great right up until the very moment that they build it. They swap the code out, and then from there on out, it's the bad code. And it started going out to the customers. So what I'm trying to point out here is that things can happen in various places in the supply chain. And again, I was a platform engineer for a long time, doing a lot of automation and Ansible and GitLab and GitHub and all the actions and the stuff. And I heard shift left all the time. Everything is shift left. And I agree with shift left. You got to try to find things as early in the chain as you can. But things can happen later in the pipeline. So I guess from my opinion, okay, in my opinion, shift left is more about the speed and the efficiency of your development teams, not having to have things get all the way to the end of the pipeline and maybe into your dev environment, then figure out they're broken or have something in them they shouldn't have, and you have to go all the way back to the drawing board and waste another sprint trying to fix that feature. That's why you shift left, so that your poor development team isn't constantly, redoing work. But from a security standpoint, shift left is fine, but you still have to check things later in the pipeline. You can't just assume that because you checked it early, everything's fine, because like we've seen in these scenarios, the infiltration into the pipeline can come much later. All right, so now we're going to talk about XZ utils. Connor, how much time do I have left?
Around
7 minutes. All right, so we'll keep moving. XZ utils was earlier this year. This is a compression library in Linux. I didn't even know it existed before this attack happened, and I consider myself a Linux dude. If you go into a Linux command line like Ubuntu and you type in XZ, enter, it's a thing. It's an actual command line command. I had no idea. But it's just a compression library that a lot of other things use. And of course, I took this is the old SolarWinds meme, and I modified it for XZ because this poor guy named Lassie Collin was the single maintainer on this one since 2009. And this is a compression library used by all kinds of Linux distributions. So the bad guys here do a 3-year, this is a 3-year job. So I believe, we don't have confirmation yet, but I believe these were state actors, and they have this pseudonym of Jiatan, and Jiatan starts getting on the mailing list for XZ, starts contributing code, and it's good code, and starts building a reputation. And eventually, what they do is they create a couple sock puppet accounts to get on the mailing list, and they start badgering Lassie. And they start telling him, by the way, you're Lassie now, hey dude, you are not keeping up. We need these features and we need them now. Get on it. Why aren't you building this stuff? Come on, code. What are you doing tonight? Quit watching YouTube and make the code. And Lassie said, I can't do this. I'm too busy. Maybe Jiatan can help. And so that's what he did. And of course, we all know now those those accounts exist nowhere else on the internet. They've looked. They were just sock puppets that the nation state actors were using to badger him. And eventually he gives the entire repo over to Jiatan. So now he has complete control of it. They even opened a PR request for this. There's a repository called OS Fuzz that's supposed to help watchdog open source software. And this is the best. If you have time to go and look this up, these guys put in a pull request for an issue that didn't exist, non-existent issue. They just made it up. They're like, hey, this fixes issue 3679er. We just fixed it up real good. And they were like, okay, and they merged the pull request in. They didn't even check to see if it was a real issue that they were fixing. Yeah, I see it. So then, long story short, these guys are able to get it into the bleeding edge versions of Red Hat and Debian. And here's what it did. Thank God that this, by the way, this supply chain attack did not reach the masses. But so what they did was they hard-coded a SSH key into XZ. And what it was meant to do this hard-coded key would hit SSH, and when SSH that had the bad XZ component in it saw that, it said, oh, you're fine. Here you go, straight to root. So you would send a payload, a specially crafted payload. It would hit the SSH. It would bypass login and allow you to directly execute that payload as root. Now you tell me that's not scary, because how many of your platform engineers tell you, oh, that machine is fine having SSH open to the world because it has this really strong SSH key that no one can break? Well, yeah, until the nation state actors figure out how to do this kind of backdoor, and then they can get into Linux machines all over the world, let alone lateral movement inside an environment. But if you're a nerd like that, you can talk to me about that later. All right, it was found by Andres. Andres was a Postgres guy, and he just randomly stumbled upon it. And luckily, we foiled this one before it ever made it out into any mainline versions of Linux. All right, so I got to bring this home because they're cutting me out on time here. Connor's mean. All right, so when you think about software supply chain attacks, Reversing Labs, we are looking at all these things. We're looking for malware, tampering, vulnerabilities, mitigation, secrets, licensing. We deconstruct the binary. We've had this engine for 15 years. We're the trusted source that the other tools are using to do this. If you have third-party software that you need to vet, we have a product for you that will help you be able to do that and be able to operationalize trying to decide whether that should come into your environment or not. If you're a SOC team and you have sussy files that you need to use an API and check the hash or check the file, upload it and see if we have any threat intelligence on it, we can do that. We can provide the threat intelligence, tell you where we've seen it, who maybe it's been attributed to, how often we've seen it, things like that that are going to help you to understand who's trying to attack your environment. This is just the console from our Spectra Assure product. And we try to make it as easy as possible for those third-party risk managers to be able to look at and see at a glance whether something looks bad or not or good. We give you differential analysis between versions. You can pop down and see whether your software is getting better or worse. And for those of you like me who really enjoy the minutia, you can just keep digging and digging and digging. We do thousands of file types, including file types like ISOs, zips, and things like that. So even if it's an archive, we don't care. We recursively unpack things all the way down to the bottom. And then marketing, marketing, marketing. That was funny. Yeah. So, hey, please come by the Reversing Labs booth. Come talk to me. There's some kind of after party thing tonight from like 5 to 8 here in the lobby, and we are doing an old-fashioned bar, so you can create your own old-fashioned. They've got like different bourbons and different stuff, so you can make like your own, choose your own adventure bourbon. So that's from 5 to 8. So look for Reversing Labs' little bourbon table from 5 to 8 tonight and stay around for that. I am Josh Knox, and thank you for listening to me rant for a while. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Come up and say hi.